Well, coming up on today's show, Tesla Energy moves forward with more battery storage contracts. The Paris Motor Show is coming. Which EVs to look forward to? And are you a frustrated Formula E racer? You could have your own Formula E car. I'll tell you how soon. Well, good morning, good afternoon and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Hello and welcome to the Thursday, the 16th of August edition of EV News Daily. It's Martyn Lee here with the news you need to know about electric cars and the move towards sustainable transport. I want to say a heartfelt thank you to the 60 patrons of this podcast, whose generosity means I get to keep making this show, which aims to entertain and inform thousands of listeners around the world every day about a brighter future. Well, we'll kick off with news about a plug-in Bentley for those with, let's say, a little more money to spend, but want something electrified, something slightly more green. They might want to be looking towards Bentley and the new plug-in hybrid Flying Spur. Now, new pics have been seen online. Yesterday on the podcast, I was talking about the Porsche hitting the track with the Porsche Panamera 4e hybrid plug-in, and the Bentley might well have similar specs to that, using similar gear, because it's almost the same specs on that in terms of the package: 456 brake horsepower and 516 pound-feet of torque. Well, like most of these expensive and luxury cars coming over the next couple of years, the ones coming with plug sockets on, they're mainly there to lower the emissions, but also as a nice way to get some instant electrical power. I would expect something like this to have, I don't know the kilowatt hour size of the battery, but all of these kind of forthcoming SUVs, luxury cars, from 25 to 30 miles of pure EV range seems to be the norm. Well, many major cities in the future are going to want cars to be able to run on EV power alone in order to avoid hefty fees for driving into the cities. So it does make sense for the car manufacturers to be making cars now with 25, 30 miles of EV range only. I would like it to be more. I'd like it to be a pure EV, but that's what it seems to be for now. That's the golden number. As with many of these changes to the range, I wouldn't expect the new Bentley to be offered in diesel, for instance, partly because of the new emissions tests, in particularly here in Europe, but also because of the changing public perception of diesel. And rightly so. But what about an all-electric Bentley? Well, let's face it, it would be bloomin' quick, and it would be quiet. The two things that I think Bentley drivers would appreciate very much. Plus, if VW are busy making the Taycan, the Porsche Taycan, formerly the Mission E, well, they've already got all of the high-end technology, just need to package it slightly differently from Porsche to Bentley. Well, I mentioned this at the beginning of the show. Tesla Energy are moving forward with more contracts as the headlines swirl around the world. It doesn't seem like a couple of hours go by without my Twitter feed being full of more Tesla stories, from taking the company private to the obsession over the weekly Model 3 production numbers. I'm guilty of that some days, I must be honest. Tesla Energy are the ones quietly getting on with major battery contracts, and I think it's a little bit forgotten about, to be honest. Once again, the story starts on Twitter, like most things with Tesla do. It was back when Elon Musk promised to deliver a Tesla storage facility to Australia on time, or it would be free. They did it on time, needless to say. This story, though, is so much more than that. The latest contract is another Tesla battery pack or power pack system that will sit next to, adjacent to, some big renewables, this time wind, a giant wind farm down under in Australia. This site is going to be about a quarter of the original one that I was talking about, the one that kind of kicked it all off. This is going to be 25 megawatts of storage, or 52 megawatt hours in the installation. Once again, about providing grid services to react to those instant changes needed in power delivery, something which battery packs are particularly good at, far quicker, for instance, than spinning up those dirty peaker plants. They can supply power in milliseconds. Well, Fred at Electric reminded us today about something that JB Straubel said recently, which I think is worth thinking about. The company, Tesla's now installed over 1 gigawatt hour of energy storage, and they aim to deploy another gigawatt hour of energy storage in the next 9 to 12 months. The power pack is likely to account for the vast majority of the capacity deployed, thanks to several big projects coming up, including that massive one, the up to 1.1 gigawatt hour power pack battery system that Tesla and PG&E are both working on. Well, there's no Frankfurt Motor Show this year. It is biannual. So that means, which is what one of our podcast partners reminded me of on Twitter recently when I was mentioning is Frankfurt coming soon. He was saying, oh no, every other year. There's a commercial show, Frankfurt, this year, but the car show is next year. So that means the Paris Motor Show, because they flip-flop, must be this year. I've just looked up the dates. Looks like it's going to be the 4th to the 14th of October. And not only can we expect some concept cars, as always, at things like motor shows and major model announcements, or at least being on display, once again, I predict that electricity will be the theme of the event, just like Geneva was. It'll be the real buzzword, and all the best cars there are going to be all about electric. What's going to generate the headlines? Well, recently we've seen all-electric BMW 3 Series cars testing with fake tailpipes to try and throw us off the scent. No chance. We saw the stickers saying it was an electric test vehicle. However, I'm not sure BMW would choose Paris to do a 3 Series unveiling of a pure electric car. I mean, it would be huge if they did. They'd catch us all by surprise. The 3 Series, a hugely important car, not just to BMW, but to the car industry itself, one of those big sellers, and the obvious comparisons to the Tesla Model 3, which is getting all the headlines, and if you look at the charts, the way that the graphs are going, taking the sales away, you would think, from the BMW. I mean, the BMW 3 Series is being eroded, but I have not seen anybody online saying I was going to buy this and then I bought that, but that's the logical conclusion that you would draw. Even if BMW aren't ready to talk about an all-electric 3 Series, we know there's a plug-in version coming. Other cars which are almost baked and now in the final few weeks of preparation to be unveiled are the Audi e-tron Quattro, most recently seen taking a bunch of journalists down on test drives down Pikes Peak, not up it, but that was to show off how proud they are about their regen system. And also the Mercedes EQC. Well, Daimler have been making more announcements recently about things like increasing their battery capacity for their EQ range. All of their electric vehicles are going to be badged EQ something. If you want to hear more about those previous announcements over the last few days, all of the previous podcasts of this show are online for free. You may hear me talking about patreon.com/EVNewsDaily for the kind people that do want to support this show. However, the archive is online for free and always will be if you want to learn from it or spread the word about electric cars. That's why we do this. Thank you very much for helping me do it and covering those costs. Well, did you ever watch a Formula E race on TV and think, I could have a go at that? I certainly have. It's not as brutal as Formula One, which requires superhuman fitness. All the Formula One drivers are just the most elite of athletes to even drive one, because unless you drive a Formula One car fast, they don't really work. Things like the downforce doesn't work, the brakes don't work unless you actually drive them at speed. Plus, of course, they cost $20 million. So no one's ever going to give me a go in a Formula One car. I couldn't handle one anyway. Normal people couldn't. However, I've often watched Formula E and thought, I reckon I could have a go at that, even if I pootled round somewhere at half throttle. Well, fortunes say that before they introduce the second-gen versions of the 2019 car, which is later this year when the season starts, the Batman car, if you like, Formula E is making the first 40 electric racing supercars available for you to purchase. It's going to cost you upwards of $200,000, anything from that to $289,000. Every model is identical. Identical chassis, identical battery. The value of each different car, I would imagine, is being driven by the victories, as fortunes say, the sentiment and collector demand. Formula E isn't officially marketing the cars. The news is getting around by word of mouth, really. Formula E actually owns all of the cars that race in the series, all 40 of them. They paid about 16 million euros for them. It's about 18.2 million US dollars, and that's about 400,000 euros a piece. So they're still getting their money back on these. They're only halved in value. Leasing them to the teams is the way that the business model has been working. 5 years ago, when they wanted people to get involved with this, very little upfront cost compared to some racing series, because you could lease the cars. You had to lease the cars. Well, Alejandro Agag is the founder and the CEO of Formula E, and he said this, and I quote, "The current cars are still fit for purpose. They've provided us with 4 seasons of exciting, intense and unpredictable racing. I know there's a lot of interest from collectors, and they could even be used for racing purposes." In the next season, new teams will include Nissan, as well as a German private team. They're called HWA. They're linked to Daimler's Mercedes, and they do constitute the brand's first somewhat of a sidestep and a very quiet, unofficial one into joining the series, along with Porsche as well. Mercedes, of course, make all the headlines in Formula One for their consistent running streak, and I'm sure they don't want to be entering Formula E and making too much noise, so for worry about taking the headlines away from their massive investment in Formula E. You know what? If anyone buys one of these Formula E cars and then offers them for track days, maybe at one of those days when you can go along to get 3 or 4 laps in a car, get some expert tuition as the day goes on. You know, there's things where you can go around in sort of saloon cars and learn how to drive properly, and then you get, at the end of the day, a couple of laps in a fast car. If they were to use the Formula E car for that, I would be well up for it. I'd have the GoPro strapped to the side of my helmet for memory keeping purposes, and it would just be amazing to even have a go. I'd probably be rubbish, but guys think they'd like to have a go, don't we? Well, moving on, I love to see these big investments into zero emissions projects because despite all the doubters and all those with vested interests in oil hoping upon hoping that it doesn't happen, if you follow the money, you'll see where we're going, and it is zero emission. Now, the Alberta government is making a huge amount of money, $215 million available in grants, available for municipalities to purchase low-emission or zero-emission buses for their local areas. Well, the Transportation Minister is Brian Mason, and he pointed out towards collaboration being the key. If you collaborate with your neighbours, those municipalities will be rewarded and favoured for grants. Now, the project also aims to reduce the carbon footprint by getting more people to take transit and put more low-emissions buses on the road. Moving on, and here in the UK, let me explain a little bit about the way London works. London is made up of various Londons. You've got Greater London. This makes sense if you bear with me. Greater London is like the wider conurbation area, and it's made up of boroughs. Inside London is the borough of the City of London. It's still London, but it's like Little London in Big London. And it's its own bit of the capital, got its own borough, its own kind of local authority, kind of rules, as it were, and they're right at the heart of the city in the square mile. It is controlled, if I'm right, it's the City of London Corporation look after that, and they are introducing new parking charges based on the emissions of the vehicle you drive, and that's good news for EV drivers who are going to pay a lot less to park their car. Which you have to do, you have to pay for on-street parking. The only way to do it is on their Ringo app. It's a smartphone app called Ringo, and they've got a new emissions-based parking product. What it does is when you register for the service and you give them your car's rego, it knows what tariff to assign you when you go to park. That's clever. It's part of a wider plan by the City of London to invest in electric transport with new chargers, with green taxi ranks. These new parking charges are going to heavily penalise those who are driving the more polluting vehicles and looking to park on the street. Starts in 4 days, 20th of August. On top of that, there's a new ultra-low emission zone. The ULEZ. Nice name, which is being expanded, and it's going to charge those diesel polluting vehicles even more. Now, at the moment, if you drive into London Monday to Friday, you pay a congestion charge to get in. I haven't paid it in a while because I always tend to drive in at the weekends, but it is £12.50, £15, something like that, and you have to pay it. However, the ultra-low emission charge, if you drive in a vehicle that isn't on the list of ultra-low emission cars, then you are going to pay this 24/7. Weekends as well, bank holidays, Christmas Day, New Year's Day, holidays, and all of that are going to be included, and it covers a massive area, as in the wider London that I started talking about at the beginning of this story. That isn't going to be for a couple of years yet, but it is coming, and it's going to encourage many people to look at those greener cars. Well, 2 more stories. First of all, let's talk about free EV charging. We all love the F word, something for free. Good news for travellers on the German motorway, the A3. Now, I will warn you, this story does include German words, which I am going to get wrong. The German motorway, the A3. There's a new charger at Autohof Strohhofer in Geiselwind between Würzburg and Nuremberg. Pretty sure that Nuremberg is the only one that I got right there. Electric cars can now charge without long waiting times thanks to E.ON. E.ON drives first ultra-fast charging station in Germany. Batteries of the latest generation of electric cars have 400 k's range, and you can top them up in about 20 minutes with the new ultra chargers, these new EVs that are just around the corner. By the end of the year, the charging stations are going to be upgraded as well, so when we finally get those cars which can charge so fast, the E.ON chargers will be upgraded. Currently 150 kilowatts, they'll be upgraded to 350 kilowatts. That's going to further accelerate the charging process. Well, their new charging stations consist, the new one at least, the first one, of a 4 ultra-fast charger station, and it can supply all the EVs on the market, they say, thanks to E.ON Drive's new electricity filling station. Interesting terminology they use, the phrase filling station. The latest gen cars can go from Munich to Frankfurt and back, and all you'll do is a quick, short pit stop at Geiselwind, either way, on the A3. At the moment, the charging is free to the end of August, and that's a free ride for electric mobility drivers of any EV, by the way, not just the ones that can take the new charge. Deliveries, I think, start in August in Germany of the Jaguar I-Pace. Maybe it's September in Germany, the Jaguar I-Pace, and then shortly after, Audi e-tron, Mercedes EQC. Hopefully not too many months away. Final story today, and I got a tweet earlier today that was asking me why in the UK there is such an increasing disparity between plug-ins and pure BEVs, and for the life of me, I can't find that tweet again. I can't find whether it was an app mention or a DM or an email to hello@evnewsdaily.com. So I'm so sorry if this was you asking me this question. I'm checking in with the latest sales figures as I look at them on my screen right now from Inside EVs. In total, 4,550 new plug-in cars were registered here in the UK last July, 26% more than a year ago, market share of 2.8, that's close to the record of 2.9 in December last year. 881 of them were pure electric vehicles, 3,669 were plug-ins, which is again up by a third. 33,800 new plug-ins have been registered here in the UK so far this year. Market share average 2.9, so close to that 3. And that tweet earlier on today asked me, why is the UK moving heavily towards plug-ins and pure BEVs? I don't know the answer. I'm not sure. Infrastructure is getting better. Maybe it's a supply problem. But I'll keep an eye out, and if anyone listening to the podcast has got the magic bullet answer why it's been going that way more recently, then let me know. You can email hello@evnewsdaily.com. Hello to our new Patreon supporter today. He ticked us over the 60 mark, Pierre Ukello. Thank you, Pierre, for becoming a producer of this podcast. You legend. Thank you so much. You joined 59 other patrons. After we got our first fantastic 50 signed up, we're on our way to the Hot 100. How many names can we add to the Hot 100 list when I put those online of the first 100 Patreon supporters? I massively appreciate it. A few comments from the community of EV News Daily. The first one from Mark Buckingham, who is Kiwi Audio and has been talking to me about the Hyundai Kona arriving in New Zealand, and he sent me 3 pictures, which I did geek over for a little bit and just check nothing was different, of the new Hyundai Kona EV in New Zealand, the red one and the now familiar turquoise colour, which they seem very keen. It's probably my least favourite colour, but I know it's got plenty of fans, and and to reach each their own, beauty is in the eye of the beholder and all that. Mark, thank you for sending me those pictures, and I'm glad that the Hyundai Kona EV has arrived in New Zealand. Glenn Mason has been talking to me on Twitter, on DM, about his new Hyundai Kona delivery. He's been updating me on that. I did ask him on Twitter, on DM, if I could give the details on the podcast, and he hasn't got back to me yet, so out of respect I won't, because he was telling me about his delivery date, how he thinks that everybody else has the same delivery date, and some more details about his situation, but I'm not going to go into it today until I get the thumbs up, thumbs down from Glenn, just out of, because it was a direct message, and he might not want this broadcaster, what is now thousands of people listening to every episode all around the world. Hello to Brian Weatherall. 2 corrections, by the way, or 2 clarifications. We'll call them corrections if you want. I'll call them clarifications. Firstly, Brian just got back from holiday and was catching up on some old podcasts, and he heard me talking about, here in the UK, the Revenue Service, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, had given some new guidance on how much you can charge on expenses for driving an EV on business, and I'd misunderstood the government document. I thought it was, because at the minute it's about 45 pence we get to put in if we drive our own cars for company business. For instance, when I do that, I can put in, that's the standard rate, I think, for most people. I can put in 45 pence per mile driven on company business using my car. I thought that's what HMRC had done with, they'd for the first time clarified their thinking on electric cars, and the rate was 4 pence. He says no. I sent him the link of what I was looking at. He said, no, actually, if you look at this section, 4 pence is the rate that your company will pay you if you use a company car, but you put the fuel in. So if your company owns electric vehicles and you drive a company car on business and you fill it up at home on your electricity tariff, it's 4 pence here in the UK, which is the new advisory rate, which you can claim back, which is not so bad. And Brian had to stop panicking for a moment. So I got that one wrong. The other one was on YouTube, actually, and we were talking about, and I'm always so careful not to be too political, because these days it can everything is so binary, and life isn't binary, is it? I'm a little bit conservative, I'm a little bit liberal with some things, I'm fiscally more conservative, certainly in my own finances and life, other things. So I don't think you can just be black or white and you can be totally binary, but that's the way that we're almost meant to be. And I'm particularly fascinated by, like, the America, if you're listening in America, your system where you literally go down to a choice of, is it one or the other? You go down to two. Like in other countries, at least we have like a choice of parties, and then they're all going to kind of work together in a mishmash. So I'm always careful not to be too political, and I said that the current administration in America, which is rolling back those emission standards, and Alan Helton kindly contacted me to say, careful with the phrase rolling back, they are freezing them in 2020. And so what I understood was that the Obama-era regulations in the US were that from now until 2026, the emissions standards for combustion cars would be getting more and more harsh, forcing car makers to get better at lowering their emissions and improving their technology. And then what's being done then, so they're not rolling back the current standards, but Alan kindly clarified and said actually what is happening in the US is that those standards are going to become more stringent than they are today up to 2020, but rather than becoming even more stringent up to 2026, they get frozen at 2020, and it's not so much a rollback. I think he was just clarifying the words I was using, and absolutely, I'm the other side of the Atlantic, and I don't want to get anything wrong, just the way it's reported over here. Well, thank you very much for all of your comments on YouTube and Facebook, and I'm trying to do more on Facebook and Instagram as well. It's when I get time to do that, but I appreciate you bearing with me on those platforms. There are, if you're a listener to the podcast, 212 previous episodes on all the usual podcast platforms. I put them on YouTube and also the blog, evnewsdaily.com. If you can leave me a review, that is the killer thing with podcasts that really help it get noticed and will help increase the reach to those people who don't know about what you and I are into, the EV curious lot. And in the meantime, come and say hi on the socials, on Facebook, LinkedIn and Twitter. Search EV News Daily. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you tomorrow.